right, so we had heard a great talk from Martin about how to improve design in our open source projects. I want to talk a bit about the other side of it, because we talk a lot about what can open source projects do, how we can improve our design, what we do wrong, why we do not talk to designers enough, and so on. But maybe there are also things that we as designers can do to communicate better with the open source developers, engineers, and so on. I'm going to be using developers, engineers, hackers kind of interchangeably here, because I'm talking about a social group, not really not professional credentials, but the group that people identify themselves as. So who am I? I'm Marmarta. My job is generally just going to hackers and telling them, humans are important. People use your software. You have to think about people. So I've seen a lot of interesting problems that arise from very bright people trying to make tools that are supposed to be used by humans. I work as UX lead at FOSS, which is a secure operating system. This is the sort of tool for people who are either very paranoid or are afraid of being hacked by the CIA. So, not a very simple project. I'm a designer, I'm a developer, I used to be a psychologist. So those are the perspectives that I'm bringing here. Everybody knows open source has a design problem. This is like 5 seconds of Googling. Just put open source and design, and this is, or UX, and this is what you get. Everybody's complaining, everybody thinks that open source is terrible about design, we don't have enough money, there's not enough designers working on it, and developers don't listen and don't care. But I don't think it's just other people's fault. It's not just the fault of the open source developers who are so set in their ways. It's not just the fault that we don't have enough money. Sometimes it's on us, on the design people, that we do not really communicate well with the engineers and developers. Of course, there are the problems also that Martin mentioned in his talk. Developers don't really listen to design people. UX is low priority. You always want to spend money on another developer and not on a designer, because we don't have much money. Design is a second-class citizen. And, well, we see it in many situations. We see it at conferences where open source design gets very little space. We see it in many projects. This is not an important part of the community. And I acknowledge all of those problems. But there is also a problem of the way that design people, user experience people, are communicating with developers. Because very often, developers don't really understand what the design people are trying to tell them. I have worked with some absolutely brilliant people who are very good at what they do, but they do not have any design background. They do not have any usability background. They basically never worked thinking about the human user. And they don't understand what the designers are trying to communicate. And naturally, people prioritize what they understand and what they are good at. So open source developers prioritize code. They are good at code. It's easy. But there's also one another thing. A lot of developers are quite afraid that when those design people come, they will ruin the project for them, for the devs. If you talk to, and I've talked to many engineers and developers and hackers, if you talk to them about what they associate with UX, with design, a lot of them will be like, oh yeah, this is the thing that ruined Enter project here. This is the thing that adds white space to all my wonderful tools. This is the thing that adds, that hides all the options that I use, and just exposes very simple things. And I always have to look for the things I use in the advanced settings. It's annoying. And well, sometimes it is true for those developers. And those voices are the loudest in open source software. The engineers, the developers, the hackers, the power users are the loudest voices. Not the main user group, maybe, but they decide what's happening. And I think there is a huge value clash, or like ideology clash, between designers, most designers, not all designers, and so on, and developers. For many designers, inclusion is a very important value. We want to make things usable for everyone. We want to make things accessible. And a lot of developers would agree with you, you know, theoretically. If you ask people, nobody's going to say, I do not want to make inclusive things. But the social environment that a lot of engineers and developers work in is quite exclusive. You get the nice tech as a prize for being a smart person. You get the powerful tools because you put in a lot of work. It is an environment that is quite exclusive, you know, ideologically, even though people will not say it like this. A lot of designers use those, like, you know, maxims, approaches. Don't make me think, keep it simple. This is something that's very annoying to a lot of developers who think of tech as a puzzle, and they love puzzles, who think that complexity is great. This is the most fun things. Why wouldn't you do things more complex? It's interesting. And there's another problem. A lot of people who learn design are taught to think about customers. And the open source developers prefer to think about users. And this is not the same thing. You sell things to a customer, but you make things for a user. And I don't think it's like a fault of the designers. It's just that a large part of, you know, if you try to learn UX design at a university, if you try to go, you know, read books, see courses, and so on, you will very often read about customers and how to sell things. And this is not what developers of open source think about. So as I said, the first big problem is that when we as designers come to open source developers and tell them, make this simpler, for a lot of people, the instinctive reaction is, no, I don't want it to be simple. I don't want it to be accessible, because then stupid people will come and use it. And it's not, of course, very few people will say it in those words, but you will see a lot of developers say things like, well, it's the user's fault. If they thought better, if they read the docs, that would work. Why would we cater to people who are not willing to put in the work? And this is a difficult thing to convince people of, especially when people don't want to admit that the thing is they don't want to share their toys and they don't want to share their playground with other kids. And the second problem, simplicity and complexity. So this is a very famous UX book. I sometimes show it to like my hardcore engineer developer friends. And their first reaction is, this sounds terrible. What do you mean, don't make me think? This is just the opposite of what I want in computers. Of course I should think. Engineers like tinkering with tech. Hackers love tinkering with tech. Telling them that you are here to make the user not have to think makes a lot of people immediately go, that's terrible. We are not making things for people who don't think. And a lot of us learn UX on a model user who dislikes technology, who is afraid of technology, who dislikes tinkering with it, who doesn't want to spend time to learn it. And of course, there is a lot of people like that, but this is not the people that engineers meet very often. For many engineers, exposed complexity is what sparks joy, makes them happy. If you show people like a big workstation with 1 billion buttons, oh, splendid, so many options. This is not the typical user that we learn UX on. And of course, there is the commercial versus anti-commercial approach. Another book recommended by a lot of people if you want to learn UX, Hooked, How to Build Habit-Forming Products. If you show this to most open source developers, they will basically be like, okay, can we exorcise that? Can we burn that? I'm against burning books, but this one is an exception. This sounds terrible. And I mean, emotionally, I agree. But the problem is, if designers talk to if developers talk to a designer and think about approaches like this, they are not going to be very interested in listening what we have to tell them. When we learn UX design, we learn how to sell, we learn how to manipulate users, and this is not very good. And sometimes the language of that bleeds through what we want to do with open source, and that's not great for convincing people. And there is also one other thing that I want to mention, just one slide. There is a gender bias. Most open source developers are men. Most designers, at least in my experience, are women, or at least half of them are women, which is a lot in that space. And of course, there is this attitude that women are stupid and we don't want to listen to women. Again, people won't say it, but unconscious bias is a thing. To summarize, so engineers often don't trust designers. It's not about not knowing that they need design, but when they meet designers, they often don't trust the things that designers offer. We often don't talk to developers. We talk at them. We come to them and say, okay, you need to fix your design is terrible. It's probably true, but this is not a great way of convincing people to do what you want. Developers are an important user group for free and open source software. We like to think about different user groups, novice users, power users, and so on. In FOSS, developers are also an important user group. It may not be a very big group in numbers, but the thing is, those are the people that work on the software, and without them, we wouldn't have it. A lot of them do voluntary work. So we have to treat them as an important target group. Because designers often be like, okay, let's think about new users, let's think about users who don't know what's going on. Developers also want to be included in this discussion. Of course, some engineers are assholes. Some people are terrible. Some people will be like, we don't need that, this is just stupid pictures, go away. Yes, some people are not possible to be convinced. But a lot of people don't trust design because they feel like design is not aimed at them. It's going to make the software better for others, but not for them. And that's not very attractive or convincing. So what can we do? I'm going to mention 4 approaches. One thing, language. It's important to learn the language of developers and what they care about. In my experience, language of service design and of product design can work much better than the language of visual design, commercial design. A lot of engineers are completely uninterested, like, I wouldn't even say uninterested, it's like performatively uninterested in making things pretty. I'm a big manly developer, and pretty is for stupid women. Don't talk about it. Don't talk about how you will make the program more attractive visually, because this will not convince those people. But it helps to focus on like, okay, let's look at the process. Let's look at the things that are happening with user. Don't talk about how it will look. This can be smuggled through it. Talk about the process of using the program, the goals. In my own experience, so I work on security stuff. Security people are a very particular kind of users. If I tell, well, this should be easy to use, a lot of people will be like, no, bad. Easy is for people who use Windows, and that's terrible. I had to learn to ask people, okay, what is important to you? It's important for you to make things secure. Okay, what is security? What are we going to avoid? We are going to try to avoid compromise. Okay, but you know that the user is part of the attack surface. So my own work was like, okay, but you know that it doesn't matter if the user made a mistake and was compromised, or the program had a bug and was compromised, the user ends up in trouble. Both of those things are bad. Maybe we should focus on making the user less likely to be compromised in all the directions. And that proved to be very helpful in convincing my beautiful, brilliant bunch of hackers that yes, it is important to think about user experience, about the user interface. I tried to do a lot of presentations, being like, okay, let's talk about the mistakes that you made. Let's talk about the problems that you caused to your own system because something was hard to do. I am focusing on explaining to people mistakes shouldn't be punished. We are not here to treat our user as a naughty child and explain to them, no. If you are using my program incorrectly, you will be punished. You are a bad child. No, this is a bad approach. Oops, sorry, what? Yes, you did move a mouse. Okay. Where was I? Here was I, yes. And in my case, later, I could even explain to people, yes, improved visual design will also help with security. Introducing concepts like, you know that when things are visually separated, it's easier to find the thing you're looking for. That was a big innovation to some of the brilliant engineers that I talked to. So the thing is, I treated my engineers as another user group that I should talk to, that I should learn their language and explain to them in the terms that they care about, why this is important. And there's another thing that you can do, is what I call nerd violence. That is, if somebody does not believe that design makes sense, oh, wonderful, here is a stack of cognitive psychology books. This is, read it and then we can talk. No, nobody will read it, but they will be intimidated by the fact that you have citations. Appeal to authority engineers don't recognize won't work. So that's why I don't like to use the mainstream design books, because, you know, the moment you see don't make me think, people are like, nope, out of it. But cognitive psychology, scientific papers, they can work great as persuasion tactics. Even though, of course, engineers sometimes have terrible views of soft science. I had to put an XKCD into this presentation because I am also a developer. So this is often the approach that engineers have towards softer sciences. It's not a real thing, right? Psychology, it doesn't work. That's why I like when I have something to explain to people, I often look for papers that use statistics. Math is a very good element of nerd violence. I try to show people that, yes, this is based in the things you believe in. You believe in math, you believe in statistics. Look, the things I want to do are based in the things you believe in. And there's another thing. Listen to the developers. Treat them as an important user group. Make them one of your personas. Because engineers are also people, and they want to be listened to, and they want to feel like you care about what they want. They are users too, and they are an important user group because they make the software very often for free. And there is another thing that I find extremely helpful in making people, in making engineers want to work with developers. Technical limitations. Very often, we make beautiful designs. We make perfect, easy to use, splendid looking designs that are going to be very hard to be implemented. And that really makes a lot of developers discouraged and not want to work with designers because they feel like, okay, wonderful, this UX person will come here and propose something that will take months of work, or I don't know how much work, looks very complicated, I do not want to do that. And sometimes you can do quite small changes to make things more accessible, approachable, easy to use. And this is something also that I think that open source process can be very helpful at. That is, if we do a lot of our design openly, we don't just, this is not just my personal Figma, I'm not showing anything to anyone. No, this doesn't work. When you do your designs, share them all the time with the developers. Show them and listen to the feedback. When people are telling you, this is going to be too hard, sometimes it's true. It's going to be too hard. And a decent design that is implemented, that is going to happen, is really much better than the perfect one that nobody will implement. If you are not a developer yourself, it's going to be much easier if you ask, while doing the design, if you ask people, OK, can this work? Can this be done? Because at least in my experience, very often people came to my project and other projects and be like, oh, I have this brilliant design idea. This is what you should do. And the problem is, it was extremely hard to actually implement, and then nobody did it. And sometimes it would be very helpful if they stepped back and discussed with us, OK, is it actually doable? Maybe we can adjust it a bit. Maybe there is something that we can take from this design to improve the general user experience without spending so much time that we don't have, like developer time that we don't have on it. So let me summarize. I don't think the bad design in open source is just the fault of those arrogant programmers who don't listen to design. Developers are also users. Developers are also people. And it's really valuable to treat them not as people who will do the things you design, but also an important user group, but also an important group of people that you want to talk to and work with, and not just tell them, this is going to be better, just do it. The language that we use matters. And to improve design, I think you need to learn the language of the people you're trying to persuade, in this case, developers of the projects you're working on. All right, thank you. That's what I wanted to talk about, and we have, I think, some time for questions.
OK, here's our first question. I really enjoyed how honest a lot of what you were saying is. Thank you so much for that. I'm really interested to hear what your perspectives or experiences in whether or not volume or ratio of designer to hacker engineer helps with the communication, the adoption, or does it, or does a gang of designers further scare hackers?
I think that really depends. I think we have to take into account the, human traits of people. So one thing that I've seen that really terrified hackers in my experience was a group of women coming to a stand manned by guys to explain to them design. That terrified them, which is very human. Like, we are all human. We have certain human traits. We are products of our society. So I do think that the experience of people are ganging up on me is not great. But that depends on the size of the project. If you are talking with a big project, more people are better, because it doesn't sound like this one crazy person who is going to explain to you, design to you. If it's a small project, less people are better. I think there is no simple answer to that.
Do we have any other questions? Any hands? No? OK, then thank you, Marta. And we'll have another short break while we prepare for our final keynote for today. Thank you.